So good afternoon and welcome to the after lunch session on candidate experience, be the team they remember. My name is Jeremy Tipper. I'm the managing partner of the Talent Collective, which is now part of the Alexander Mann Solutions family of businesses. More importantly, since 2012 had a significant involvement in something called the Candidate Experience Awards. The awards were started back in 2012 in the US and set up as a not-for-profit organization to recognize businesses who were looking to enhance and engage candidates through the recruitment experience. Established, as I say, in the US back in 2012, I'm very pleased to have been able to bring the Candidate Experience Awards to the UK in 2013, and indeed it starts its life in Australia as we go into 2015. So the purpose of today's session is to share perspectives, really, as to why candidate experience is important as part of the talent acquisition strategy, and also hopefully to provide some really practical insights into what companies are doing to engage candidates more effectively, that hopefully will bring you some takeaways from the session. Unlike normal, we're not going to leave the questions till the end. We'd really love this session to be participative and to involve as many as you that are brave enough to be involved. And so what we have alongside me is a panel that will help facilitate that discussion. And I'd like them now to introduce themselves. So Jill, if you'd be kind enough to start.
Yes, so hi, I'm Jill Duthie. I am Head of Direct Sourcing for Royal Bank of Scotland Group.
And Matthew?
Thank you. I'm Matthew Jeffrey, Global Head of Sourcing and Employment Brand at SAP.
Thank you, Matthew. My name is Derek Bambrick. I'm Talent Acquisition Partner with Hertz Car Rental.
Fantastic, thank you. So Jill, let's start with you. Perhaps from an RBS perspective, you can share with us one of the challenges is often kind of getting the business engaged in the concept of candidate experience and understanding its importance. So perhaps you kind of share with us a little bit about the RBS journey.
Sure. So as a business, our goal is to be number one for customer service, trust and advocacy by 2020. I think what we often lose sight of is that our candidates are our customers. So we're very much encouraged to put the customer at the heart of everything that we do as an organisation. So from a resourcing perspective, clearly what we need to do is put the candidate at the heart of everything that we do. So we really sort of try and challenge the business to put yourself in the candidate's shoes and think about how you want to be treated. I think oftentimes we don't see beyond a CV to a person, and we don't see that a candidate is a customer. So by trying to sort of bring that back and go, well, you know, how would you feel if that was you? That's the sort of challenge that we give to the business all the time.
And share a little, if you would, about the engagement of the business. You were describing to me about you've had some challenges from a candidate experience perspective, and you've been able to share some of those examples and some really good things that you're doing.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a couple of things that we've done. We've drafted a candidate charter, which we hope to launch in 2015, the first quarter. Really just to set out some basic principles around, as a candidate coming into our recruitment process, this is what you can expect from us. And it's you know, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's particularly pushing the boundaries, but it is just the real basic things around. Our adverts will be clear and concise, and they will tell you exactly what the job is. We'll try and move you through the process in a timely manner. We'll give you feedback. We'll give you as much information that you need in order for you to do the best that you can at interview and throughout the process. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And then just on a kind of bringing it to life basis, what we've tried to do is a programme of training for our resourcing community, which is around real life case studies. So taken really specific examples of this happened to this candidate. So this person came into the recruitment process, they were 4 months in the process, they were in for interview 6 times, they met 5 different people, we took a month to sign off their offer. That wasn't the example, obviously that stuff doesn't happen, but really kind of bringing that to life, because I think when people see it in black and white and see the timescales involved, they actually start to go, oh God, hang on a minute, that's not good. So we felt that was quite powerful, just in terms of, letting people understand, actually, this is what we do to candidates sometimes.
Great, thank you. And Matthew, I know since joining SAP, you've been looking at the candidate experience, particularly through the lens of your early in careers programs. Do you want to share a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about candidate experience is that, let's be honest, and SAP in the past has been very reliant on the famous bounce back email. Someone applies, boom, they get the bounce back, the standard old wording, and a recruiter will review your skills and experiences. They closely match the job specification. One of them will come back to you in due course. And that was felt to be the candidate experience, which is poor. But it was always the excuse that was used, or at least we've done a bounce back. So when you look at things, is that you need to look at the overall strategy that you're going to have for recruitment and sourcing. Early talent is key. So we looked at early talent and graduate hiring. We did the same old tired and tested route. We would go to the preferred universities. Let's work out the best ones in the UK, trot up to Oxford or Cambridge or whatever else, make friendships with those university professors, then try and squeeze in and, who are the best students, and try and wooze them and seduce them into coming to SAP. But as we know,
Sounds painful.
But it was the strategy, and that's the strategy a lot of companies are still doing. But the key thing was that the best graduates may not go to the top universities. They may not have the funding to do so. They may need to stay at home for various other reasons, looking after family or whatever. And so we were missing out by our very selective elitist strategy. So then we looked at it, let's open it up to other universities across the world. And what's the way of doing that? Throw it open to social media. The business was, Matthew, you can't do that. You're going to get thousands of applications and we're not going to be able to review them. So then we looked at it and thought, okay, what are the things that we want to put in place? Real-time candidate feedback. You want to know if you're going to get an interview the moment you apply. Is that utopia? No, it's not. We can do that. How do you do that? We put in place an online assessment, partnering with chemistry, a 15-minute cultural assessment, pass-fail, and then we would put in place a 20-minute situational judgment questionnaire, pass-fail. We were able to set the bar then of those people going through. The individuals get the real-time feedback, and then they get the option to come to us about why they were not right to move forward. Perfect, they knew straight away. For those moving forward, we would then book up the interview. So for us, we'd introduced, real-time feedback. We'd democratized university hiring because we'd thrown it open to social media and to universities across the world, and it was a big win. So candidate experience you can make big impact on.
Great, thank you. And Derek, give us a perspective, if you would, of what candidate experience means to Hertz.
Well, I suppose we set up our shared service recruitment centre in 2009. It's based in Dublin. And I suppose previous to that, it was very much our hiring managers were the ones engaging. So there were no control mechanisms, there was nothing going through. So once we set up the recruitment centre, we then had control. I suppose from our perspective and from my own perspective, I've been 30 years in the recruitment business, you always have to put yourself in the shoes of the candidate. I think it can be the loneliest place or the loneliest action a candidate can do with great hope, and especially like a major brand like Hertz, there is a job out there for me. So we had to, it's like retraining, and how we've done it is engaged with our hiring managers. There to me are my business partners. The candidate, as Jill has already said, are the customers. So we put in a mechanism. We have an ATS system that we use quite a lot. We engage with those candidates through, unfortunately, to a knockout letter or whatever, but we do set the parameters up. And I think the only way that comes, once you've done a pre-selection on who you've selected or shortlisted for that job, is to really speak to that candidate. We've all heard it time with social media, pick up the phone, talk to that candidate, build that relationship, reach out, I call it the verbal handshake, you know, and really hear their emotions and hear what are they looking for, why are they looking for a job. And it's really continuous contact with that candidate, letting them know what's going to happen and then do it. Because I think if you have a bad candidate experiences, we all do it. They don't hear back from anybody. You know, and I think if a candidate was to stand here today and, you know, picture perfect would say, well, I don't get a response to anything I applied for. Well,
Yep.
you know, that's just bad manners. But more than that, they're going to tell other friends as well.
Yep.
So we've put a very strict mechanism in to really assess. We have online assessments that people do. We have a knockout. But more importantly, we deliver from the personal contact. And I think that is key for any organisation, including our own. And we've made a lot of mistakes on the way. But really, you know, we're learning now, it's the use of the phone, it's connecting with that candidate, because they're going to trust you.
Yep.
And that's what it's all about. It's the trust element.
And actually for consumer-facing brands like RBS and Hertz, for example, it's absolutely essential. The point that you made earlier around candidates also being customers. A really good example of kind of behaviour of people that have been treated poorly in the recruitment process. One of the large retail players in the UK made a direct correlation between feedback from candidates that had a poor experience and their spend in their shops based on capturing the data on their loyalty card. And perhaps unsurprisingly, the amount of spend fell away for those people that were giving feedback that the candidate experience had been a poor one. So there is a genuine dollar value to the way we treat those people through the recruitment process. So we have the lovely Xenia and Marion at the back there. Let's open it up to the floor. Any questions or initial perspectives that you'd care to share? Down at the front here.
Hi, I've got a question for Matthew Jeffrey. So you hear about sort of graduates having, or sort of young talent having this 140 character concentration span. So you put them through like a sort of 2-stage process. How do you keep them engaged and wanting to carry on? How do you not sort of lose any talent on the way?
I think that's a great point, and for us is that we look to this and put it into focus groups and test it. At the end of the day, what does a millennial or a graduate want? They want that feedback, they want to know if it's a good fit. So we flagged up front the time it would take, what we were trying to achieve by this, and giving them that chance of letting them, you will know the feedback straight to know if you're a good fit. And so some people will say, you know, cultural fit, what does that mean? We worked on our competencies, and that candidate wants to know, am I a good fit? Because if they're not, they'll be toddling off into the distance. The situational judgment, it's a bit of fun as well for them to go through, get a sense and get that feedback. So, you know, I would say with any millennial, they will invest time and put their concentration as long as they feel that they're getting something back. And so that's what we trusted in, and it's worked for us.
Yeah. And do they also learn a lot about your culture through that kind of early process?
Yeah, and I think the key thing with that, they learn, SAP is a tough culture. It's a brand that doesn't, you know, it's not a fluffy brand. It's very much focused on results-driven process and getting in there. And so, you know, some of the other companies, of course they are those, but they may not have the fun feel that we have. And that comes across in some of the competencies and how we describe the company. So transparency. Google Dave at the back there said yesterday, you have to be real, you have to be authentic. If we started saying that SAP was like Pixar and there's people going around in scooters and, you know, playing basketball and this sort of thing, people would then come there and go, holy cow, that's not happening. And then they go back to Glassdoor and slate us off. So Google Dave, you're completely right. Be authentic, and I loved that about you yesterday.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Any other questions? Or yes, in the second row. Perhaps you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself as well as you ask the question. That would be terrific.
Hi, my name's Leah. I'm the head of resourcing for the Unipark Group. I guess I would just be keen to understand what your view is on managers who seem to feel that it's okay to use the interview process as a test of candidates' resilience and commitment to the job. That's one that I hear quite a lot, and there seems to be a real lack of emotional awareness about the contract that they're building with the candidates from the off. But it seems to be a go-to excuse.
Yeah.
I might answer that, actually. you know, the one thing once we set up the recruitment centre, it's all about engaging with the hiring manager. You become their mentor, you become their teacher on process and the reason why. And for me, you know, when I deal with my hiring managers, and it all starts from the intake meeting with the hiring manager. What are they going to be looking for in that candidate? What are their expectations? We teach them, we give them training on behavioural interview training. We set out the whole KPIs. If they're going to be interviewing on their own, which I'm never happy a hiring manager doing, and I'm sure we'll all agree, I will get the assistance of a HR business partner. But more importantly, and back to your question, and a very good question it is, it's really, you know, hiring managers have a need to fill. They have to come back to us, and how I measure that is through interview summary. They have to write a lot of notes. They have to take that whole experience serious as well. And with LinkedIn, I've been able to, with the use of the LinkedIn recruiter tool, I've engaged my hiring managers to really sit down, profile themselves better, and for them to nearly talk to the candidates before they meet the candidate as well. I encourage any prospective candidate who comes to Hertz to link in with the person they're doing the interview with, so they can see their connections. And you'll be very surprised, the hiring manager will find some common connections, some common bond, so that that little piece is done and dusted. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I think my only comment on that would be there is still this mystery sometimes with the line managers about LinkedIn and why would I want to connect with them? It's a bit odd.
Right.
You know, they feel they feel that it's an invasion of their personal space, and there's absolutely an education piece around that as well. And I guess in utopia, it would be great to be able to say, well, we've delivered the training, so therefore it's done now and we can trust them. But as the recruiters, when we've been that acceptable face and we've built that initial relationship to then pass that off and see that person not quite being treated correctly, sometimes you feel like you need to go in and baby it quite a lot.
You do. You become a bit of a... You have to mother these guys, you know, and it does become, and you have to mind them and to make sure. But once they're engaged and they can see the positiveness of having their profile there, because as I say to the hiring managers and anybody I deal with in the organisation, the candidate's not looking at my profile. The candidate's going to be looking at the people they're going to be working with. They want to see the organisation. So it's very important that at least their profiles are updated, they're engaging, and they can see that, you know, they're all on the same path together for careers as well.
Jill, do you want to share how you've engaged your hiring community?
Yeah, so we've had to get a wee bit zero tolerance on this, actually. Yeah. So we, in conjunction with our candidate charter, we've done a set of guidelines for hiring managers, which just basically sets out really clearly, this is what candidate experience is, this is the context, this is why it's really important, and actually you have a massive impact on this, and here are your touch points, and here are the things that you need to do. And honestly, I sort of, some of the stuff I thought, should I actually be calling this out? Because it seems really basic, and it is around things like, you know, a candidate's diary is just as busy as yours, so actually have some respect for that when you're arranging interviews and things like that. So from that perspective, that we've done that. I think the other thing is we talk about this constantly within resourcing, both within my team and the wider resourcing community, and we really, I passionately believe that it is resourcing's duty to be the candidate champion and absolutely calling out where things are happening that are unacceptable. So, you know, really empowering the recruiters to go, hang on a minute, that's not happening. But as I say, it really does feel like a proper ongoing battle a lot of the times. Yeah. And I think, you know, you've got to look at also your own recruitment, because if you're bringing in people to work in resourcing that don't have that passion for delivering that level of candidate experience, then, you know, that's a problem right at the outset.
Yeah, and it's a fine line, because you're trying to be the... you're trying to business partner that individual, so you want to be flexible to their needs, but actually there needs to be a respect, as you say, for that candidate experience in their diary, because they've all got things to do as well, and the best people will not be waiting around.
Absolutely.
So.
No.
Does anybody have an SLA between the recruitment function and hiring managers, particularly around timeliness and feedback? Anybody? Yes, at the front here.
We made
Sorry, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Hussam Al-Muqtim from Saudi Arabia. I'm working in a semi-government company which is holding all the e-government projects for the
nice to meet
government.
you.
And we made that SLA, and it's helped us very much to just reach their expectations for the hiring managers.
Yeah.
So when we just receive a request, they know how much it will take to deliver that CVs after we met the hiring manager and understand all the needs he needed to fill the position.
Yeah.
So it helped us very much to reach the expectations well and fast, and also it gave us just a hint how much is our performance is improving within time.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience.
Terrific.
So, touching on that point about the hiring manager. So the hiring manager in the process has the degree of arrogance. I'm taking the decision whether you're coming into my company or not. So they strut around with that confidence. Actually, the candidate also has a decision in this. I'm going to come to your company or not. And so the interesting thing is that you've got that dichotomy then. So with the hiring manager, put them up for hiring manager satisfaction surveys, test them out and give them that real-time feedback. I remember a case of a previous company. We had a hiring manager, struts in late to the interview, doesn't have the CV, sits down with the candidate, doesn't apologise for being late, sits down, pours a drink, then just a general quick introduction, does 10 minutes of questioning, and then says, sorry, I'm so busy at the moment, I need to rush off to another meeting. Leaves the candidate in there, doesn't tell the recruiter that this poor candidate's still sitting in the room, and goes. So do you know the beautiful thing in this day and age, social media? That candidate went on social media, expressed what their experience was, then it escalates, others comment on it, I've had a similar experience, etc. And the beautiful thing, it reached one of the senior managers. That manager was then called in to see the senior manager and was given a stripping down. They were never late again, and then they were one of our best interviewers. Social media is our friend as well. Once the hiring managers realise is that they're in the spotlight as well as the candidate, then it's a beautiful experience.
Terrific.
I actually genuinely think it should be incorporated into hiring managers' objectives. We've not done that, but it is something that I keep pushing for, because I think they need to have responsibility and ownership, and there needs to be repercussions if they're constantly not hitting the mark with that stuff.
And I do think, engaging not only the hiring manager, but it's out throughout the whole process as well. I've had horror stories of somebody arriving in a reception in our offices or whatever, even to the receptionist not knowing that person's arriving. A room is not booked. Something happens in the whole process. And especially senior candidates, very impatient, can't find parking. God love them. The candidate is stressed enough as it is. So you have to make sure that all the little pieces are put in place. But again, I go back to your point about, hiring managers' engagement. They need to understand. What we do is we look for immediate feedback from the candidate from the interview. I feed that back irrespective of their interest. We also send out an interview summary form, which I like to give them 2 or 3 days to complete if they're still in a round of interviews. No decision, or we will not push them through what we call through the process, is made until I have all that information. So I, as a recruiter, if they've interviewed 3 or 4 candidates for the same role, can see each and every single interview summary, that I understand, as a recruiter, that they're making the right decision, but they're prepared to document it.
So I think that concept of an SLA, or if you like, a contract between the hiring manager and the recruitment team, is actually an essential part of the process, in that I'm sure many of us have been in the situation where a hiring manager is frustrated because the recruitment process is taking too long, or we haven't found the right calibre of candidate. That contract to understand, so that the hiring manager understands their role and the importance of their role in that process, I think is essential, and particularly the simple stuff around timeliness, respect and feedback are probably just at the very heart of that. Any other questions or perspectives?
Hi, thanks. My name's Simone. I'm the head of resourcing at EE. So I just wanted to ask, is there not a danger of creating such a fantastic candidate experience that it actually doesn't resemble the reality of working in that organisation?
Not for us at the moment.
Matthew, I think, mentioned the point around authenticity, and I think it's a really fair point. You know, absolutely, if the perception that you create of your organisation through the recruitment process, and I'm sure we'd all love to be there, isn't quite as outstanding as the reality, then clearly, you know, you're likely to suffer as a result of that from an attrition standpoint, and actually a reputation risk.
And I do think you need to be honest and candid.
Yes.
You need to set out the warning signs. You know, if you say to your candidate, well, you know, you're coming on board to a wonderful job, we've interested, it's going to have its challenges. There's no day it's going to be the same. We're going to put you through X, Y, and Z. And again, it boils down to one thing, and that's communication. So you do have to be real. You do have to be authentic. It's not about the brand selling. It's really giving that candidate the choice to choose whether I want to go further through the process or I want to pull out now. And sometimes I ask candidates that. Yeah. You're going to go through a long process. At what stage I'd like to know, and the valid reason why you'd like to pull out of the process. Because if they continue to the end process, if they get to wherever the offer is made and then you're negotiating, and then they start on day one, well then only the recruiter's at fault for not explaining that. So I'm a very firm, it's been candid, been real, and I think they'll respect you more for that.
I would agree with that. I think obviously we've had a fair degree of bashing in the press, etc., over the last kind of 5 years. So we always do. I feel as if actually sometimes we kind of maybe over apologise for, oh, this has happened and it's been terrible and so on. But I guess what it does do is it, you know, if we don't mention it, somebody will always ask the question around, you know, what the situation is. So I think we probably are almost overly honest about these are the challenges and this is what's happened and this is, you know, this is what impact it's going to have on the role. So, but yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you've got to give a true picture of what the role is and the pros and the cons.
Yeah. And Jeremy, I think people set themselves up to fail.
Yeah.
So one of the people I most admire in the industry is actually in the room actually today, Glenn Cathy over there, the Boolean ninja expert, etc. And what I love about Glenn, and not literally love Glenn, but what I love about him is that he's getting to the point of, you know, if you look at the talent pool, 80% of the market's passive, we need to reach out into that part. The 20% is the active part. Now think of a recruiter, they're getting hammered in an organisation, 50 recs, they're panicking, the hiring manager's saying, I want candidates tomorrow. What are they going to do? They automatically panic. Boom, what should I do? Let's bung it up on Monster, let's bung it here, bung it there and everywhere else. And suddenly you've got all of these different candidate pools generating and coming and feeding this monster that are not going to get a good candidate experience. They're not going to get the replies, they're going to get pissed off, they're not going to feel the love. And so you come back to, if you've got too many channels open, your candidate experience is going to fail. So Glenn's point is that, you know, look at those channels. And then we get into big data. Brendan Brown was talking about it this morning is, you know, get the analytical tools, see where your candidates are coming from, target them, be precise. You know, this is a military operation, you're going in there to get them. If you start honing your recruitment strategy, building your direct sourcing and reducing some of those channels, your candidate experience is going to get better. And you can focus on it and enhance it. Too many channels and you're lost.
I totally agree with that. So that's something that really impacts my team because we're doing so much within the sort of passive candidate space. That what happens is the recruiters will engage us, we'll go away, we'll do a lot of work, we'll go and tap people on the shoulder, we'll bring them in. But what will also happen is they've got it advertised here, and it's so you end up, instead of having, you know, 5 really good people for the job, you've got 60 applications that you're not going to use. So I think we do need to be a lot more strategic about our sourcing. I think that'll have a big impact on it.
I do think, you know, I think what's happened with social media over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think we've all been bombarded with new technology, new ideas, and, you know, new ways of doing things. I'm a firm believer that we are the brand ambassadors for our organisations. If the candidate were branding the organisation, we're selling the brand. It's not so much selling, the position of the job, because you can mentor that. But if your behaviour and you get back and you communicate and you listen, that to me is more positive than anything.
Just throwing the question back to you, I mean, EE's done a really nice job from a kind of consumer branding perspective to reposition the business, having come out of the sort of T-Mobile and Orange history. Is that an issue that you see that you face?
I think the biggest issue that we face is getting consistency across a massive nationally dispersed hiring manager population. Yep. There was a point made earlier about candidates rocking up and rooms not being booked. If a candidate came to EE and there wasn't a room booked and they couldn't roll with that, they're probably not the right fit for EE.
Yeah.
Because often you can't find a meeting room and you just go with the situation.
Yeah. That's a good point about the sort of reality of your business and not setting an unreal expectation. So the interview takes place in the coffee shop, presumably, or something like that.
Yeah, and that's not the norm, and we wouldn't like to do that every time. But if it does happen, then you just go with it because that's part of working life at a company like EE.
Of course, yeah, fantastic, thank you. The gentleman here in the orange jumper, please.
You're making a run now, look.
My name is Nishant. I'm part of the recruitment team at Al Ghanim Industries in Kuwait. And majority of our hiring is expats, like from mid to senior level, almost 80%, because the talent doesn't exist in Kuwait, so we have to scout from various countries.
Yes.
And one of our most critical pieces is onboarding.
Yep.
Because Kuwait is a tough country to settle in for somebody who's coming from Europe or Australia or from America.
Yep.
So do your organization also feel similar challenges? Because candidates, when they become employees, and the new candidates, the prospective candidates, talk to those employees. How was onboarding? How was schooling? How was the residential flat and entertainment facilities? So do you also feel challenges wherein you do a lot of expat hiring like us?
Well, I suppose, suppose what we do in Hertz is we have a 30-day onboarding survey. We were going to make a decision at one stage to do a 30-day, 60-day, 90 days. And we just felt way too much. Because what you were opening up was you were opening yourself up as recruiters to a lot more criticism. It was the new candidate felt they were still part of the recruitment process after 90 days, when really it's down to the hiring manager. You've got him now, you look after him. But the onboarding, we do a lot of onboarding surveys, and in that time they'll talk about the recruitment process, they'll talk about what's happened on the induction, and really, finding out if there is an issue. And as recruiters, we will sort that issue out with the hiring managers or whatever.
Matthew?
I think I look at onboarding differently. As if you look at it from 30, 60, 90-day perspective, onboarding's permanent. This is about teaching and learning and making sure people feel part of the organisation.
Yeah.
Too many companies tick off the box. You've been there 30 days, you've learnt where the toilets are, you've learnt where the canteen is, and you filled out some objectives and boom, you're now part of the organisation. Pugwash. Absolute rubbish. You've got to be consistently looking and encouraging your employees to be learning, nurturing and building them up. So, yeah. I mean, that's a big adjustment we're going through at SAP at the moment, to go past those barriers of putting a fixed number on it, yeah. Making sure an employee who could have been there 10 years, they still have to learn. Yeah. You don't just leave them rotting in a ship. They're continually, you've got to push them and let them grow.
Yes. Some of the people
in a ship.
In a ship. Great.
So one thing that I would suggest also is not that onboarding is for 30, 60, 90 or for however long your tenure is, but it actually starts before the candidate has actually arrived in your organisation. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's some really smart things that businesses are doing, particularly in the early in careers space, about creating communities prior to individuals arriving, so that line managers can share about what's happening in their organisation before the start date, that actually if you're coming in on an early in careers or perhaps an expat programme, that you've had the opportunity to engage with other people that are joining at the same time prior to you starting, so that sense of community is already created. So I agree with Matthew, onboarding is for the long haul, but actually it has the potential to start way before the start date as well. Mm. Yes, in the front row, over there.
I actually just want to.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Heidi Vassini, I'm from Rumble Oil and Gas.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I just wanted to give a comment to the gentleman who was just saying this before, because one of the things, even though we recruit to Denmark, we recruit a lot of international candidates.
Yes.
So we actually started that process way early. As soon as we find candidates that could be potential employees, we actually start with the pre-onboarding at that point. So what is it about working in Denmark? We send out a candidate presentation that tells them about the company that they can read on their own, something that they can't necessarily read on the webpage.
Yep.
And what we've done is that throughout a year, we actually collected all the information, the most common questions that we heard, the best practice, the things that came up that people thought were difficult in the first time they were here. And now we have the mobility consultant being part of the second interview if it is a person who's not currently employed in that country.
Fantastic.
So the whole thought of actually starting it way before you have actually hired the person that they're starting, that's what we're trying to do.
Terrific, really, really great case study. So one thing that I think is really interesting about expatriate hiring, or indeed if you're recruiting across multiple sites, in the case of E, for example, is the whole piece around logistics and even just the process of getting interviews arranged. And I think one of the innovations that has kind of hit our marketplace in the US perhaps a little bit more early, but more recently in Europe around digital interviewing is a really interesting topic when it comes to candidate experience. Has anybody got anything that they'd like to share about the use of digital interviewing platforms and how that impacts the candidate experience? Maybe it's just me. No, please.
I actually haven't implemented it yet, so I was a little bit unsure if I should say something. But one thing I've been looking into is one of the issues that we have is with time differences, people having really hard time taking time off work, and different locations. I'm globally responsible, so I have recruiters in India, in the Middle East, in Europe, etc. So one of the things I've been looking into, what I haven't implemented yet, is video interviewing, which is, there are different products out there, but the one I've zeroed in on is where there's actually a question that you can formulate, and then the candidate has a number of minutes or hours or whatever to either answer case-based, situational-based, or the like. And I think it's really the way to go instead of Skype interviewing, because I think the validity of it and the ability to judge by more than one person, it just becomes better. But I don't have an actual case yet. Okay. Maybe next year.
And I agree with that. And one of the things I consistently go back to LinkedIn is you're great at facilitating candidate introductions and giving us the tools to do that. Put in your own recruitment interviewing tool in there that we can use as a common base. So, there's so many different video systems out there, and you use Skype or whatever else, but that could be something for LinkedIn to look at if they're listening.
There you go.
The gentleman at the front, sorry to have kept you waiting.
That's okay. Shane Hicks, Vice President of Global Talent for Epicor Software. It's a question about passive and active candidates. We know, and as Matt said, 80% approximately of our candidates are passive.
Yep.
I wonder if anyone on the panel's hiring managers have any different toolkits for interviewing passive candidates against active candidates.
That's a really interesting question.
Really interesting question, and I think any time, I would, if I find a passive candidate, I would make it very clear to the hiring manager that this person is a passive candidate. It's a look and see situation. So you'll sometimes get a lot of negative feedback from the hiring manager. Well, Derek, don't waste my time me interviewing. But I said it's the passive candidate that's the one that'll work. So how I've managed that is not to put them through it's more of an open conversation. So it could be a pre-conversation with the hiring manager to just have a general chat to get them to know each other. Again, to review each other's profiles on LinkedIn or share the profile. And then at that point, an invitation can be made for them to meet face to face. Because that's when a knockout can be done.
Yep.
Because if you have a situation where you have a passive candidate coming in, and again, setting up expectations, it's very important that the hiring manager is aware and that his time is precious, but he will know, right, I'll do a phone interview and then I'll do a face-to-face.
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably about 80% of the candidates that my team generate are passive, so we don't have an absolute set in stone way of dealing with this, but what we will either have done is positioned it with the hiring manager maybe have a coffee chat first of all before they go into a competency-based scenario. So a chance for them just to, and when I say a coffee chat, not a coffee chat where the hiring manager then goes and makes his mind up to decline them on the basis of that. You know, really kind of informal, give them more information about the role. If one of my team has had a reasonably in-depth conversation with them and the candidate feels comfortable with moving to a first stage, then we'll do it that way. But we kind of take it different scenarios for different levels of roles and things. But I think it is really important to differentiate them and realise that there's probably a bit more of a sales pitch needed done on it. And also to recognise that again, you know, the need for them moving through the process in a kind of timely fashion, because we spend so much time going and finding these guys and trying to engage them and trying to bring them in. To then not do anything with them for 6 weeks just drives me absolutely bonkers. So that's, you know, it's very important in that space.
Matthew?
And there's a psychological thing that's at play here that is making sure that the hiring manager understands is that if they want the best talent, the best talent is at another company, happy, being well rewarded. You know, they're not looking to move on. You're having to seduce them. You've got to give them reasons to come to you.
There's a lot of seduction going on in your life, I have to say.
Google Dave.
Watch out, Google Dave.
So Google Dave yesterday said you have to love your audience as much as you love your wife. And that's a really true expression. You've got to show them that love. So a hiring manager, you know, what's the traditional
I'm not sure
thing?
I'm going to take that out of this particular session, I have to say.
But look at what we do. We give them, to excuse my French here, a shitty job spec. And then the job spec doesn't represent the role, and we expect them to go, wow. And this comes to the interesting thing. I was talking to the hiring manager the other day about sourcing, which they didn't understand. They think that everybody wants to come and work at SAP. You pick up the phone, or you send an in-mail. The moment an in-mail hits the box of a really great candidate, it's like, wow, they're going to apply. Well, actually, rubbish. It takes a lot, and there's an art. The hardest part of talent acquisition today is sourcing. Getting out into the true passive pool and convincing somebody who is on fire in their company, on fire, they're going to be looked after, they're going to nurture because they don't want to lose them, and then convince them to lose that and come to you. That hiring manager has to show them the respect they deserve. That's psychological as well as obviously going through ticking all the competency boxes.
And you know, and it's a point I'd like to make about in-mails, and you know, and it's always been my concern as a recruiter that, you know, many senior candidates out there, or many candidates, I'm sure, and all of us have received them, could on average receive, say, 10 or 12 a day. So what's going to make yours different? Why are they going to respond to you? And there was a discussion about this earlier on today regarding, you know, statistics on in-mail responses. I do think it's all about the quality of the email. I do think your first email should not be written with a job spec attached, which I see a lot of it happening. My name is, and, you know, I work for. I think you need to have an open discussion. I'm maybe not even talking about recruitment, not even talking about your organisation. You're gearing this person, you've homed in on that individual, maybe they're a program manager in IT. So maybe open up that sort of delivery.
Yep.
And that's where you'll get the candidate then taking an interest, responding back. And when you go after a passive candidate, or a passive candidate that's engaged, a lot of us, and I know we're to blame as well, throw that person into our ATS system. They get treated, they're in an ATS, they might get an auto-response letter 2 or 3 weeks later. Hiring manager has said, no, I'm not interested. But hold on a second, you look the fool. You came after me.
Yep.
You've gone to your hiring manager. So already what you're doing is you're exposing yourself as a recruiter that you have no connection with your hiring manager.
Any other perspectives from the floor on a different approach to passive candidates and managing them differently through the recruitment process?
I have actually a little bit proactive question. You say that the best candidates are the passive ones, but I meet challenges every day from hiring managers who are used to traditional channels, and they think that the best candidates are the active ones. So what are your convincing points that why would passive be better than active?
That's definitely one for you, Matt.
Oh, no, Jill.
Jill, beg your pardon.
Go on, Jill.
There you go. Go on, Jill. Sorry.
I don't necessarily think that passive candidates are always the best candidates.
Yeah.
I think you need to define your sourcing strategy on the basis of what your role is. So for our lower level roles, I do very much try and encourage us to be working in that active candidate space. So using our database that we've built up from our advertising and so on. I think for a senior level role, it's the difference between I think the level of the role is just the difference between whether you want to have good candidates for it or whether you want to be satisfied that you have looked at the best in the market. I think that you do that on the basis of the level of the role. But I absolutely agree. I don't think passive is the answer to everything, because I also think that what you do when you're working in that market is you're opening up enormous amounts of conversations with candidates, and let's face it, you're not going to do something with all of those people. Yep. So I think you need to be really you need to do robust search, and you need to be quite rigorous in terms of the people that you go and that you tap on the shoulder, because I think otherwise you then again are in danger of a bad candidate experience and an impact on your brand.
Down at the front here in the second row.
Hi, good afternoon. Elina, Opera Software, Norway. I think one of the answers to, at least in my view, the difference between the passive and the active candidates is the motivation, and where is this motivation placed? So if we have active candidates, the way I see it, those are candidates with internal motivation. They already have this in them. And the passive ones, the motivation needs to come from the recruiter. So they're a little bit more laid back in the sense of, okay, convince me. Why do I need to work for you, right? And this is always a difficult task, to motivate someone or to make them believe that they are motivated to work for you. Sorry, I'm quite nervous. Hate speaking on the microphone. So I think what we're doing, I'm not saying we're best at it, but and I'm sure a lot of other companies are doing the same, we're using a couple of motivational questions just before the interview when somebody has agreed to meet us. And the questions themselves, they're not meant for the company, they're not meant for us to gather information on what exactly do you know about us, but we use them in a bit of a tricky way to make you go and find out things about us so that you build internal motivation to work for us. So we place the questions in such a way, for example, obviously Norway and the Scandinavian climate is not the reason that they would move to Norway. So we try to form the questions in such a way, for example, what do you think you would like about the Scandinavian culture? Or is there something in the Norwegian social policy that you would like? In that way, when they come to the interview, even the passive ones, they already have this kind of psychology. Nice. Oh, I think that place is cool, and that place is somewhere I would like to work in. Okay. So for us, the difference between passive and active candidates is where is this motivation, their motivation placed, inside them or outside them?
That's a really nice technique.
Shift that balance towards intrinsic motivation.
I love the way you say it. And you speak very well on the microphone, so you should do more of it. So well done.
I hate it.
Practice. Just to make a comment there about what you're saying about, the active candidate. I suppose, in the last year or two, and we see it now with mobile handheld technology, we in Hertz, and we see a lot of this, especially for some of our lower level roles, be they customer service reps or bus drivers in Heathrow or whatever. That market, they're sitting on a mobile phone on a train home. They've just had a row with the wife or the boss or whoever. See a job, go into Indeed, click, apply. That's fine. Comes through to our ATS, they get a phone call from a recruiter. I never applied for that job. And the amount of candidates I feel at the moment are lazy in their applications. They're not keeping a record of who they've applied to. And already, to me, that's a real no-no. If you're passionate to come and work for Hertz, you'll remember you've applied for our organisation. Yeah. Because there are so many, and I'm sure you'll see it in RBS. Who? Hertz? What is that? I've often had to say it, yellow and black brand organisation, car rental company. Oh, right, okay. And you just know. So to me, that's not a quality candidate. But what's happening is they might be perfect for your role, but you have to, as a recruiter, comment to them, we know you're active, we know you've applied through this, you've already damaged a little bit on your candidate experience from my point of view, because you can't remember who you're applying to. So we just have to be very wary of that. And I think we need to control that a bit better as recruiters.
That's why I controversially said about passives are better. I better frame that up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So when you look at a role, you obviously want the best talent. Of course, let's take Jill. She's one of the best sourcing leaders in the world today. I know her pretty well. So if you're looking to hire a sourcing leader, of course you may be lucky at a moment in time that Jill's looking at a job board and will reply. Brilliant. Okay, then you got Jill. But ultimately, you're going to look at it, who are the best sourcing leaders? And then you're going to start to map the market, work it out, use referrals, use internally, and you start mapping. Then you're into pipelining and building those pipelines. And so, are you likely to, if you rely on a job board or put it up on your, career site, the roulette wheel of the right person at the right time, at the right moment, being pissed off at their manager to apply, that's a lot of lottery to get the best candidate. So yes, you can get the active candidates who are good, but you need to know who is out there who's going to move forward. And this is based on, a number of different roles. So you start looking at your key sales director roles. What happens if your sales director moves on and wins a lottery and goes and lives in the Bahamas? What is your succession plan after that? The sourcing team need to be doing their strategy of pipelining. Okay, who are the other sales directors out there? Let's build a relationship. Google Day famous term out there. You need to build a relationship, woo, seduce, that after a time they may come to you. A passive isn't going to come to you straight away. You build that relationship over time, and that's when you'll win. So you need to have to unlock the passive market and use the active market.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's a bit clearer.
I think we've got time for maybe one or two more topics. The gentleman here in the second row.
Mike, sorry.
Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, sorry, there's two people in the second row.
Thank you. Sorry. Well, we kind of moved past the subject I wanted to ask a question about, so I just scrabbled around and found another one. But it's still relevant, and it's quite a baseline question, but I would be really interested to get your view. We talked about that candidate journey and the experience and looking after them. Totally recognise you need to make it realistic, because, if you're not operating within Disneyland, don't wear kind of Mickey Mouse ears in the interview. But one of the questions that I have, or challenges I've faced, not a lot, but several times with managers, is the kind of subject of expenses within that process. And I get the typical, well, if they really want the job, they'll pay those £300 to come down to the interview. In some of the, and I've worked, don't look into my profile now, because I have worked with some organisations that are quite big that will pay and some won't. And I would just be really interested to understand your view on that. Should it be par for the course? Because I do believe in terms of the emotional intelligence piece, why should you ever assume that a candidate's got that money? And, should that kind of inhibit whether they can attend an interview?
It's not the most impressive thing for a brand if you say to a candidate, come down and pay your own train fare. They're going to think, what a tight-fisted company you work for. So
I think a lot do that. A lot of big brands will say, no, actually pay your own. I think
so there is a workaround, I suppose. What I normally do in that situation...
Send a car out.
Send a car out. Chauffeur-driven. Send a car out, chauffeur-driven. I do. Doesn't turn up, but it's there. What I would like to do is really organise the telephone interview first.
And actually, going back to my perspective on, I think what a number of companies are doing and seeing the efficiency of is using digital interviewing as actually probably a more engaging way of first round interviews, probably getting rid of some telephone screening, and actually, as a result of that, only perhaps bringing those people to interview that you have actually had the opportunity to engage with pretty significantly. And so I agree with Matthew's point. I think it's probably pretty tight-fisted if you're not prepared to pay the candidates interview expenses. But is there a way that we can be engaging with candidates in an effective, engaging way prior to bringing them into interview? Because as we've mentioned, in some situations that physical interview process can be quite an unattractive proposition.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and we've all been, I'm sure, in that situation where you've been in an interview or your hiring manager's been in an interview for 30 seconds and pretty much knows that this isn't going to work. So I think, perhaps there's some techniques that organisations are starting to deploy to engage candidates in an effective way without necessarily sitting on the other side of the desk.
Can I just say that we do pay interview expenses, just in case anyone was looking that up. But
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes, so the one time for one final question from the gentleman at the other end of the row there.
Hello, I'm Sam van der Put from Telenet Belgium, Senior Recruitment Officer.
Nice to meet you.
Sometimes we deal with a little bit of arrogance of the passive candidates, because we as recruiters, we almost call them to death to come to an interview. Then they go at an interview at the hiring manager. But those candidates, because we contact them and they going into the interview almost thinking maybe they already had the job, and then we get back the feedback from the hiring manager. Oh, it's not a cultural fit. He was really a little bit arrogant. He already thinks he has the job. I don't have the possibility to make a decision about it. And then, the process stops.
Yeah. Maybe you ought to take some advice from the lady in Norway and the motivational questions that come before the candidate comes through the door. I think it's a terrific idea and maybe something that could be deployed more widely. Any comments from the chairs?
I think you just need to manage the candidates' expectations when you're having the initial conversations, because I think we're always quite clear around, look, you look great, we've got a role we think that you would be a good match for, but we absolutely don't say it's a done deal. We explain that there'll be an interview process and, that there'll be other candidates involved in that and so on. So I think you've just got to kind of position it. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I think, again, it comes back to, I want to touch on that word authentic. And going back again to Google Dave yesterday, social media, which we haven't really touched on much here, we have to humanise the companies we work for and let them know what we're about beforehand. And I'll be honest here, I looked at SAP's former career site before I was able to demolish it, and it was pictures of blokes in suits looking up at our CEO clapping. And it used to look at me and thought, how dull is that? And you go through it, and then there's a lot of product marketing stuff on there. And brilliant. The stats are there, great revenue and all that stuff. But it didn't reveal who are the people, what do they do, what's the culture, how do you actually, keep people there, how do you train and develop? And, reaching out and touching and speaking with the candidates and letting them know what you're all about. Social media is perfect for that. I look at companies who are still doing Twitter feeds with a list of hyperlinks back to the job site. I mean, you've got to be bloody dull to sit and look at that and think, oh, great.
Right. Well. On that note,
on that bombshell,
let me just say, I hope this has been an informative and helpful session for you. For those that are kind of just starting out on the candidate experience journey, can I just suggest that a really good starting point is any colleagues here? Any people from BP? The BP gang. Nice to see you. So I think BP have done an absolutely terrific job of their candidate charter. So if you were to just do a search for BP candidate charter, you'll find what they've done. Put some great stuff up there. It's a really nice starting point to get an organisation thinking about the candidate experience and the engagement process. Also, go to candidateexperienceawards.org. There's a really interesting white paper that allows you to kind of benchmark what good practice looks like across the world. Hopefully some useful takeaways that you can take from today's session. Just leaves me to thank Derek, Matthew and Jill and all of you for participating. I hope it's been a useful hour.